Wanted to say thank you so much for this opportunity because I'm a huge fan, and to get to meet you and talk to you for the very first time in front of a large live audience is pretty special. So I'm very excited. And I feel like just maker to maker, I think I might want to ask you more questions about like your practice and process and just sort of things about your own life and your own identity and how that kind of relates to the work that you create. So I guess also just with you in particular, I feel like there's a lot of similarities, like maybe not even just in terms of the work that we make, but just maybe certain trajectories that we have and personal things in our lives. We're both Korean, growing up in the 70s. From what I understand, your mom and your sisters, like your primary family. Mm-hmm. Same thing for me. And what else? 70s, yeah. And I just feel like, and we're both from the East Coast, pretty much. So mm-hmm. I feel like that somehow informs who you are as well. But yes. We can talk about that like in my question number 2B. But yeah, and then parallels in work, and I think even just, I think a lot of your work has to deal with beauty and also process and intuition. And for me personally, I also came at ceramics a bit later in life. Like I worked in fashion and then also studied textiles. Mm-hmm. So I feel like my background's a little bit more in design. Whereas for you, like I understand you've had a very sort of extensive like work history across different disciplines. So you studied painting, and then you also dance or did performance, right?
I did a minute, yes.
Yeah, and then worked in fashion, mm-hmm. worked in film. Like it's pretty amazing. And I think that you obviously have a lot of skills that can be translated in different kinds of mediums. And like methodologies of working also that probably, you know, sort of work well in different fields. Mm-hmm. So, okay, my first question is basically has to do with just like if your background sort of in fine arts comes from painting, like how is it that you came to work in ceramics, mm-hmm. and, you know, are there certain sort of similarities in, you know, thought process that happens, you know, across different ways of working? And you also garden as well.
Yes.
So it's kind of amazing, like how
I'll just move it so it doesn't freeze.
You're like a Renaissance woman. You know?
Well, you know, I started painting a very long time ago. I'm talking like high school, first year of undergrad, and I wasn't a very good painter, and painting is actually very difficult for me because when you put the paint on the canvas, what you see is what you get, and it doesn't really change unless you change it. Mm. And I think with ceramics, it was a little bit easier because it gave me the ability to play around, get messy, and like put it in a kiln with glaze and have the fire change it. So mm-hmm. it was a little bit less pressure of like what the final image or final product would look like. And when I first started my undergrad at school, the Museum of Fine Arts, which is the school that I teach at right now, I somehow stumbled into a throwing class. And I think probably at that age, I was dealing with a little bit of PTSD because my father had just died when I was 15 years old. And then I left home to go to college, and I didn't really have any life skills. Mm. And my mother was so busy working, the immigrant life, just like working, sometimes sleeping on the job site. So I was really just left to my own devices. So by the time I got to college, I didn't know how to properly eat or take care of myself. So I was just like partying, and then found myself in a throwing class. And something about the wheel, even though of course I failed at it in the very beginning, the way that it demands your attention for, you know, in order to center, to lift the sides up, and, you know, create whatever, you know, vessel, cup, mug, plate, or whatever you're doing. I think something about that meditative process really stilled me that I needed at that time, and it was less pressure for me to play around in the ceramics area and get really obsessed with clay and this new medium than it was for me to sit in the studio and paint these paintings I was painting that were so terrible. In fact, I was living in a dorm when I first moved there, and there was a housekeeper there that saw that I was painting, and she asked me to do a portrait of her, and she gave me a picture of her just smiling. And it's hard to paint teeth, smiling, and I painted her and I left it, and she never retrieved it. And I kept saying, your painting is right there, I did it, of your face. But she never took it, and I was like, what? She didn't like it? So that was indication that I should not be painting, but I always wanted to go back to painting. So that's why I think when I started making my ceramic paintings a few years ago, ooh la la, my ceramic paintings, special delivery.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Thank you.
So funny.
I was overjoyed because I was able to smell linseed oil, which I think is one of the best smells in the world, and I wish that somebody would make a perfume out of it. And it's I think I paint just to smell linseed oil and just to play around with the different textures. And I do love painting, but painting also has ceramics has a deep history. Painting also has just this, this legacy that's sometimes complicated, and there's so many painters, so it's hard to fight.
Yeah.
In there.
Well, I also think it's probably challenging, going straight from whatever your mom's house to college, and then having this expectation to know who you are, what kind of work you want to make. So it makes sense that it's kind of even the way that schools were designed so that you would take a foundations level course. So then you kind of just get familiar with process and skill. And then from there, they slowly kind of release some of the boundaries of projects and assignments.
Well, it's interesting because I found a school that actually does not have foundation.
Right.
And they, at the time in the 90s, museum school would accept students that were a little bit older. So it was there was a maturity level there, but it was also a free-for-all. You didn't have to pick a major? A major. And and it's still very much stressed that it's interdisciplinary, that you take everything. So sometimes that causes problems because people don't know how to they don't know how to use a scissor or use Photoshop or something like that. So they're trying to deal with that now. But at the time, it was extremely liberating to be able to take whatever I want without having to worry about there's no grades either.
Oh, I love this. Yeah.
It's very free.
Huh. I'm always telling students not to worry about grades because nobody cares, and a lot of the times now it's just so structured. You've got to give these rubrics. I'm not sure if you have to grade.
I'm so bad with the rubric.
Yeah,
but also grades. I realized how grades are really good because we don't have grades right now.
Yeah.
Still. But when I taught at Princeton, I gave a student a B for a midterm grade, and he was so livid, and he wrote me and was so indignant, and it really pushes students.
Yeah.
Because they want an A
guess.
and they want an A+. So if you give them a midterm grade of anything below an A, it makes them hustle.
I see. I just don't respond well to that kind of
Me neither.
dangling a carrot in front of somebody.
No, I'm awful with grades. I'm a DF student.
Yes.
Usually.
Cheers. Yes. Okay, so I did want to ask you to for me, when I first saw your work, I assumed that you didn't come from a background in clay. Because there's this liberation that you have from the baggage of working in ceramics, and I think that kind of maybe makes sense to people who use the medium. The way that you anyway, I just think of you as being idiosyncratic and having this you're just this punk rock ceramic or artist, and kind of pushing against sort of what the expectations are of working in clay. But then at the same time, there's something about the way that work is presented, even just outside of ceramics, but just in terms of just art and visual sort of communication. Even with your show, it's sort of the spectacle. There's this big screen, your curtain, and there's something very dramatic and even just the way that you know how to use color and sort of sumptuousness of glazes and different textures to kind of really draw people in. So there's something, where am I going with this?
I like your thinking, though.
But yeah, I just think that there's still something about it that you're very aware of how to use visual mediums and space to it's not like you just are reinventing everything, so it's not like anarchy or something when you go into a show of yours.
Well, it's interesting because I think I've made a career of I'm like I say, I'm like a D student, and I've never done anything very well, but it was very apparent to me that art was the only thing that I could do or wanted to do. And I'm the type of artist that if I'm out of the studio for longer than a week, then I get extremely depressed, and if I'm not working with my hands. So I basically need it to live and to feel like, why even exist in this world? I need to do art. This is what I need to do, is to make things in order to feel okay. And but I was very aware that my my handling of materials is very, like, I don't want to say I'm not very good at it, but like I don't know how to do math very well. I don't know how to do percentages. Like, I tried woodworking, but you do need to know math with woodworking. So it's like I can't really grasp, like my brain can't grasp certain things completely. Like, I can't learn things to the completion of what I need to in order to master something. But my desire is very strong to finish things and make things. So I use that desire as the gasoline, as the fervor to make my art. So I think like maybe there's a tenet in the work that is about like completing something by any means necessary. Like maybe it's like a lipstick on a pig, it's like not necessarily like right, but at least I tried, you know what I mean? Hopefully, I danced with Stanley Love Performance Group. That was when I was a dancer for a short amount of time. And he was someone that studied at Juilliard and had a performance group with people that were professional ballerinas, professional dancers, and then non-professional dancers. And he would put everybody together, and it would create like a beautiful union of society, dancing to top 40 hits that he chose, like Janet Jackson, Whitney Houston, Aaliyah, and Prince, many other songs that he chose. And through that, I was like, okay, I'm on the right track, because he was like, hope. Is it hope? Trying is the most beautiful thing. Something so simple. Just try, And I think for the longest time when I got out of undergrad, I stopped making work. I moved from Boston to New York City. I had no money. I had to get a full-time job, with what skills? So I fell into retail for like over a decade. No, not over a decade, a few years. And then for some reason, I didn't make work for a total of 11 years. And it wasn't until I found a ceramics studio in Greenpoint, a communal studio led by this really gentle woman, Janine Sopp, that was just like, come in. And like, I went there on their holiday party. She had stuff cooking on the stove. It was so homey, cozy. And like, I was like, oh, I'm in the right place. Because at that point, I'd been working these jobs that were like, just in a field that I didn't want to be working in. So everyday life became like a struggle and like an existential crisis, and just like, what am I doing with my life? I really want to be doing art, but yet I can't because of fear. And I really just needed like someone to like be like, welcome, as communal studios, communal ceramic spaces are. Which is so wonderful about ceramics is like, it's very good for people that isolate, that don't know how to talk to others, are scared, because you have to rely on other people and talk to people, you know what I mean? And like, you can't be alone. You have to work with one another.
Right. It takes a village.
Truly.
Yeah, I actually wanted to, I kind of wondered, I'm going backwards a little bit, but thinking about just how, I'm not wrong to say you were like a punk rock
I was more goth
or something. Though. Okay.
I was a goth teenager, and I guess like right before I moved to college.
Okay. But I feel like that's also like finding community within like subculture, like and counterculture movements. I feel like is a huge part of, for a lot of kids, just like coming of age, finding your people. Do you feel like some of that still like resonates? Like, do you actually identify with anything about who you were as a teen?
Oh, yes.
And I'm only asking because I know there's some students here who are like from OCAD or really young in their careers, and maybe also I'm always been kind of a late bloomer and a bit immature and slow.
I'm a late bloomer too.
So I feel like, I don't know. like, yeah, I just wondered if there's parts of that you saw in yourself that still kind of are apparent to who you are, and then just the importance of that community, even just like growing up, or
Absolutely. That community saved my life. Like I said, my father died when I was 15 years old, and I was just like at a place where I had no idea why are we alive? And my mom was struggling so bad, and we had to move out of our house. There was a lot of trauma and a lot of secrecy and a lot of things that came out of the wash at that time. So it was a very confusing time. So of course the thing I went to was drugs, alcohol, and people that were, punks and goths that could relate to me, that also had dead dads. And we would go to shows, we would do drugs. It was like literally the thing that saved my life.
Yeah.
And then laughing,
Yeah.
that was so important. It was like hanging out with people after being so depressed for so long, and then your father dying, and then wondering like, what is the meaning of life? How do I even get to school now? Like emotionally, not like physically, but emotionally, and face the day. But then all of a sudden you have like a community of people, which
Yeah.
is something I found before I went into ceramics. I found it in the other people that I would go to shows with in the city and listen to music and, talk about life, art, and books and everything.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like even there's so much that parallels, I think, into ceramics about the idea of community, because there's too much to learn as well. So you always have to kind of draw on other people to kind of help you problem solve, like even if it's just technical stuff. And I think that's such a big and important part of just any artist probably who's working. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about your experience at Long Beach. I know we talked about it a bit, but you basically sort of stumbled upon it by accident. I feel like I heard that somewhere.
Yes.
And then, yeah.
So I was living in Brooklyn, and I saw online that it was the sculptures of Ruby Neri, and I was like, how does hell did somebody make this ceramic piece so big? Like, where would you even fire something like this? And then I went down a rabbit hole and found Cal State Long Beach and the residency program there, at the time led by Tony Marsh. And literally a week later, they posted on their Instagram that they were accepting applications for the next residency. So I asked my boyfriend, my partner, Graham Collins, who's also an artist and in the audience tonight, I was like, would you consider moving to California? Because at that point, like you were saying, your studio is set, you have your kiln, it's walking distance, I don't even have to train the subway anymore. Everything was set in Fort Greene, and I was like, should I apply to this? And he's like, yeah, just do it. So I applied, I got in, and it was me and the fellow artist, Anna Sue Hoy, that both got accepted for that segment of time. And I was originally just going to go for 6 months. We had a 6-month subletter, but once I got there and I felt the breeze in my face, and it's like you're walking inside and outside, and it's kind of like a beehive, and people are making ceramics like life size and beyond. I was like, maybe a year. I'm going to stay here for a year. And then Tony Marsh invited me to get my master's there, because I was starting to get offers for teaching. And he says, you're going to want to get your MFA if you want to be considered for a tenure track job. So
Right.
I was like, okay, I can kind of treat this as a residency. So I stayed there, and it was probably the most formative ceramic education for me, because it's not that the MFA program was like incredible or anything, but the ceramic department there, the undergrad program, is so strong. And then you have so many artists coming through, like Anna Sue Hoy, Amy Yao, Jessica Jackson Hutchins, Raven Half Moon I met there, Simone Lee. There was just so many, Stephanie Haynes that teaches at Alfred now. I mean, it was just like an incredible education. And because I didn't drive, I was just stuck there. It was like, I'm not going to go anywhere. This is where I'm staying. So I stayed in my studio and just worked and talked to people. And there's just something really magical about being able to just like, hang out somewhere where like it's endless hours, and you're working with this material, you decide to go to the cafeteria or like the Starbucks on campus, and then you see somebody walking with a mug, George is walking with a mug, and you stop him and you're like, what's that glaze? He just got it out of the kiln. I was like, how'd you fire that? And he's like, it's cone 10, but it looks like cone 6, and this was a slip trail, but it has a little bit cobalt, and I was like, oh, this is so special. This doesn't happen in life necessarily outside, like you just stop people and ask them
nerdy questions.
Like really nerd out on like, that's my favorite thing, is to actually talk to people about chemicals, ceramic chemicals and materials, and what's not in production anymore. Things that you wouldn't know, like when you're just walking down the street. But like I went to Anderson Ranch this past summer, and then I was able to like talk to other people that knew people know a lot more than me. That's the thing.
And it's very generous. Like I feel like people who are part of the community generally share information, like people sometimes can be really like proprietary about glazes, etc. But generally, like if you kind of show that you're interested and you're actually trying to discover this stuff, everyone's pretty like easy to share, because it's always like a bit of back and forth, which is awesome. So I'm curious about like California, like, because to me you would be more East Coast kind of vibes. Yes. And do you think that like California changed maybe your outlook? Like, did you always knew maybe it was like a place you would just stay?
I actually lived in San Francisco twice before that. In '92, I did a semester at San Francisco Art Institute, which was mind-blowing. Just for 6 months, it was an incredible experience to be at that school.
Is it in Oakland or?
It's in Russian Hill in San Francisco. And there were, people like walking through that school that are like legends. Like Lydia Lunch was teaching a performance class, and George Kuchar was teaching a psychotronic film class that would always sell out. And it was just like a very interesting, like very, I don't know, just different flavor, let's say, than museum school. And then after 9/11, I was living in Tribeca during 9/11, and I moved. The air was so intense that we moved to, my boyfriend back then, his brother lived in Hayes Valley in San Francisco, so we moved there for a minute. And I worked at Pearl Paint on Market Street, I think. But
I feel like San Francisco at least has like gray weather. Like there's this really funny video of like Chloe Sevigny talking about how she can't stand Los Angeles.
I think it's hilarious. Yeah, it is too bright. It is like this picture here is from a gallery, The Pit in Glendale.
Right.
And I remember when we were installing this, it was so hot that I was like, I don't ever want to install anything in this gallery again. It's so hot.
But it's dry heat.
It doesn't matter. Like I went to Palm Springs during the summer. It was 104. It said on the thermometer.
Yeah.
It's insane.
Yeah.
I like going to California to visit.
Yeah,
but
just to visit.
It would be cool, I think, also I lived in Long Beach, which was great, really great food, incredibly diverse city. It'd be interesting to live in other parts of Los Angeles.
Interesting. Other parts of
like
Los
East
Angeles.
Side.
Oh, sure. Is that closer to the water? Or?
I think there's water everywhere around there. I think. But Long Beach, we were near the water.
Oh, right. There's a beach.
But it was a little oily.
A little oily.
Yeah, I think there was like an oil spill or something.
Oh, literally oily. Well, and then I guess too, because now you have a home like in rural New York, right? Or just
it's kind of, yeah.
Is it?
It's in the Borscht Belt. If you saw Dirty Dancing 1, that's where I live. Like those bungalows. I mean, they shot actually in North Carolina, but where it's based is where I live right now in upstate New York, about 2 hours out of the city. And it's really lovely because we have enough room for our 2 dogs and our studios. And if we get really stir crazy, we just drive down to the city and see shows and see people. I think the hardest thing is actually not being around like enough people that I love, so that I could just text them and be like, let's go hang out.
Yeah. I mean, but do you find like that like the pace of living in a quieter sort of space, like you're more productive, or like even California, I feel like, because it's much, I don't know, everything's like one level. There's no high rises. There's, it just feels like people have bigger spaces, even though it's like crazy spread out. Like, I feel like that affects the work that you make, So did you find like that experience of being there like really shifted like the scale of your work, or I know you were learning a lot, but I'm sure you were making
like
a
these
lot too.
pedestals. Actually, I went to Long Beach to make pedestals first, and then and this is a picture of one of my influences, Rebecca Warren. We were talking about the way that her Robert Crumb-esque bodies were really very tantalizing to me. And then this is Willem de Kooning's Clam Digger series, or maybe one he made. I don't know if it was a series, but I love the way that he sculpted the body, and it very much felt like the way as we age. For me, it was like getting older and getting like a little bit foreign with like your own body. It's like, what's going on? So then when I was in Long Beach, I started making figures because I was like, oh, so we have large kilns here, so I might as well try to, as I feel like getting older and going through changes, what does it feel like? Let me make a body that feels like looks like what it feels like to get older.
What temperature are you firing these to?
These were cone 6.
Cone 6.
But they were in a gas kiln, so they reduced a little bit. And I realized when I was there that I really wanted to try cone 10 reduction, but for my purposes, the colors and everything, it's better if I do oxidation.
Ah, interesting. Yeah. And so were you experimenting with lots of different firing techniques and stuff too?
Yes, mostly I would say cone 6 oxidation, cone 10 reduction, but then I started experimenting with different cone 10 glazes, which I had never done before.
Because it's so much more transformative, I feel like sometimes. So there's different kinds of firing. So if you fire in reduction, there's a lot of carbon that's in the kiln, and you'll get different results firing in that kiln versus like an electric kiln. So.
Absolutely, yeah. There's more
mystery.
Yeah,
almost,
mystery.
Yeah.
I mean, even like I started doing wood firing recently, just to experiment and like learn actually about the communities that form while wood firing for a week long, and the different shifts. Everybody has a different shift where they feed wood to the kiln, to the anagama kiln, and I was very interested in that type of camaraderie, and mostly the snack table I was very interested in, and just like talking to other people. I think what happened was moving upstate, like you were asking before, did change the work, and I think what changed the work was living in Long Beach, living in a house for the first time, and then leaving Long Beach and deciding we need to move to a house instead of an apartment when we moved back to New York. And then
you got a taste of the space.
Exactly, a taste of the space, and then what was it? Then getting isolated again,
right?
Because the space is great, but now we're upstate and there aren't that many people around. So then I start to seek out wood firings just to be around people, to see what other people are talking about. And also I went to Korea. I was mentioning I hadn't been back to Korea since 1988, and I was able to obtain fellowship money through a school, the Tisch School at Tufts. I teach at a university that's owned by Tufts University. I teach at an art school that's owned by Tufts University, and there was an opportunity for me to get funding for this research trip to Seoul to learn about ceramics, because I realized even though I'm a ceramic artist, I'm so detached from my own heritage, and I've been so Americanized that I don't know jack shit about Korean ceramics, so I want to learn. So I went back there, and then I found these incredible old kilns, these old anagama kilns in the country, and I started fantasizing about installing them in a gallery space or inside of some type of exhibition space, but that would mean I better learn about wood firing because I don't want to be a poser. So I started going to wood firings.
In Korea?
Participating. No, in New York, upstate New York. I was only in Korea for spring break.
Okay. So then what did you do when you were there? Was it mostly research? Or?
Yeah, mostly research.
Okay.
I went to museums, galleries. We went to visit Incheon Lee, who I met briefly when I was doing the residency at Cal State Long Beach, and he's a master potter that lives about an hour outside of Seoul, or 2 hours. And he lives in a house that's also connected to a studio with a few wood kiln or anagami kilns outside, and also an archive of 40 years of work. And he ate with us and showed us his incredible archive, and just so generous and incredible. So I went to his show as well. He had an exhibition in Seoul.
That sounds awesome. I wonder too, like if so this idea of like not really feeling so in touch with like your Korean heritage or not knowing so much about it, but anyway, I feel like when we had our little Google chat, I wanted to ask you sort of about how like your experience as a Korean immigrant like shows up in your work, if you think it does. I mean, I kind of think it does in a way. And even I think because I just kept pressing on this thing about you being like sort of part of like or whatever into your goth stuff, like it's sort of a way to kind of rebel against sort of expectations, finding your people, and then just sort of like to reinvent your identity or be part, like create your identity, as like a response to maybe not fitting in because of lots of reasons, but also maybe just because of your experiences of moving to America when you were little. Like did you notice like a change, or did you feel you were different or anything like that? Or I'm not sure, because you were in New Jersey.
Well, when we first moved, we moved from Seoul to Manhattan, and I went to PS 41, and I remember being a happy little kid. I didn't remember being like depressed or anything like that. It wasn't until we moved to New Jersey in 77 or 78, after my sister Lila was born, that students, other kids, like I was standing in line for something. That's my sister when she was born. I remember students started teasing me in a racial fashion, making fun of me, that something about being Chinese. And that's when I started retreating into myself, and I just shut down. I shut down because that's when I started noticing, something is different about me and it's not good. It's not cool. So I better just disappear. So I think when you ask about whether or not my work, how much I'll paraphrase about the immigrant experience. It's interesting because I think I make work that's so personal, and it's each show I've made is about something that's happened in my life, whether it's my evil piano teacher, Miss Thompson's Mirror, or Marie was a recent show I did at Martos Gallery in New York City, and Marie was based on this tomb I visited in the 90s when I was an undergrad. This is Graham. This is my my partner. He's also my right-hand man, the man behind the woman. But let me get to Marie Laveau. Marie Laveau was a voodoo priestess from the late 1800s, and in my early undergrad years, for the summer, we took a road trip, and we wanted to make a horror movie in the graveyard that she was buried in, and it's a mausoleum, and people since the late 1800s have gone to her tomb, and they've marked a wish. They mark it with an X, and then this is her tomb, and they drop an offering, and I believe the next thing is that maybe you knock 3 times. And it was such an incredible sight to see at that age, that time I was in my life. It was like, like I said, it was like right after my father had died. I was very confused. I wasn't sure about the work that I was making, just like a wayward young person in this world. But then I saw this tomb, and something made sense and something clicked. Then fast forward, you live life, blah, blah, blah. Then in 2022, I found out that somebody had painted her tomb bright pink, and then they tried to restore it, but the latex, the pink paint was latex based, so it pulled at the plaster and kind of destroyed the surface. So you no longer can visit her tomb without being accompanied by a guide.
Right. Oh.
So I don't even know if you could mark it up anymore. So that made me very sad, but that also made me reminisce about that time, with the knowledge of where I am now, and that everything is okay, even though I didn't know it back then. So it's kind of interesting. I'm sure I made a wish of like wishing, like, hoping that everything was going to be okay and that I was going to make it, and, dealing with like depression and anxiety early on. And I wanted to pay homage to her, so I rebuilt the tomb in my gallery at the time, and then threw these terracotta pots and filled them up with flowers that me and my partner had grown in our yard. And then, things that you carry throughout life, like trinkets or like knickknacks and marbles and movie stubs and cigarette butts. And, you accumulate all this stuff. And I was like, oh, this is the reason why I've accumulated all this stuff. I'm going to scatter it around her tomb and then also let people come to the gallery and mark it up, make a wish. And I had some really interesting people write me and said, they had been to the original, the real tomb and made a wish and a mark, and they had wished for a child. And then they went to my show and with their child, and they were able to mark it up again and make a wish. And
I guess it's really cathartic, right? To participate in that kind of way. And even just like a subtle marking of an X, they're just two little lines, but especially the accumulation probably feels very powerful.
Like the wood firing, accumulation of people, accumulation of wishes, dreams. Like, I love any site where people that you don't know are leaving something. Like, you ever go to like an amusement park in the summer, in the heat of the summer, and there's trees and they have gum stuck on them on the lines? It's because people are waiting on lines to get on a ride and they have nothing to do, so they stick their gum. This is in the 80s, but I made a piece about the gum tree where all this DNA is stuck on here, but people don't know when you're sticking it that you're going to be sticking your gum next to somebody from
And it's so beautiful
Canada.
too,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful site, like the original 23andMe.
Mine's still like under my school desk, I think. But oh gosh, what did I want to say? There's something like
the immigrant thing. Basically,
that's
I think it's not like overt, but in a way, like my work is about the immigrant experience of like, how did I assimilate here? It was a struggle, but I did it. I did it so well that I feel like I was whitewashed a lot. Not here in New York, America. I was whitewashed very like intensely, and it's about breaking out of that, but also honoring what I've gained from being an immigrant in New York for all my life.
And so with going to Korea though, did you feel like at all, I don't know, for me when I go, I actually feel less, like I always feel kind of not quite, this is really my space or my place. And sometimes I'll try to force myself into situations where at least if I'm in the clay sort of field, then that will help bring me in. Like, did you feel like at all like there was like a connection there with just that? Or
totally, because of course, like I'm so distant from Korean culture, like Korean, and I was like, what's my way to get in there when I was going on this trip, on this research trip? And I found, oh no, I forgot his name, but I made a friend and I found him through Airbnb experiences. Oh God, what's his name? Harry Cho.
All right, Harry.
I don't know, like I was doing all this research, what do I do when I get to Seoul, like ceramic wise? And I found Harry Cho's website, and he gave ceramic throwing classes to expats or people that are visiting that are on the Navy base and like just anybody. So I wrote him and I was like, can I take you out for coffee? And me and Graham went to his studio and hung out with him and his wife and their dog Daisy, and they were so nice and so funny, and they made fun of things that I said, like, aren't we gonna eat bulgogi? And they're like, we don't eat bulgogi. That's so like, they like thought of it as such like an 80s Korean trope or something like that, or anything
you
that
didn't
I
ask
said.
for LA kalbi?
I said the wrong cut of meat, apparently. But they were so wonderful, and I was like, oh, this is something that could only happen in 2023, like with the internet.
Right.
You find somebody randomly, hit them up, and then they welcome you with their open arms because through ceramics.
What else do I want to ask you? Sorry, I've got lots of things here. Well, I guess I'm curious too, because you have, I know I'm kind of jumping around, but do you still do the glaze moods? project?
No, I don't do Glazed Moods was my tableware line that I did on the side when I wasn't making work for shows. And Glazed Moods started because I had friends that owned stores that wanted to carry my stuff. I love making mugs for friends and plates, and I don't think there's anything better than being able to make a mug for a friend and having them use it first thing in the morning.
Yeah.
So I started doing that, but it's not like the demand got very high, but it was cutting into art making, and then I started teaching full time 2 years ago. So as soon as I started teaching full time, I just cut it out because I was like,
the payoff isn't really there.
yeah. Or normally a person, they would hire an assistant and have them make it and stuff like that, but I just didn't have the bandwidth to do so.
Yeah.
So yeah, I shut it down, and I think if I do another tableware line, I'll just name it something else. Do like a resurrection of some type of different name.
So, I mean, I guess I also wanted to ask you just in general about labor. So how do you, because you do a lot of things, you teach and, you know, you also have a very active studio practice. So do you have like assistants? I'm assuming maybe because if you're primarily making at your studio at home, it would be your partner, but your partner has their own practice. So.
Yes. I don't have assistants. So I've had assistants before, but only for a short amount of time. Like I had my friend Dino throw me really large pots so then I could assemble them when I was in Long Beach. I keep thinking towards I need an assistant, but I just don't ever get around to like just sitting down and writing the specifications and what I want.
Right.
Like it's like just one of those things that like floats. But I would love an assistant.
Well, because I also think you're very much like engaged in process. So I would imagine like in your studio, like, is it very kind of intuitive? Like, do you work, like have a list and just sort of knock things off the list, or like, how do you work?
So say that I have like right now, I had the Cooper Cole show to finish. So that was on the top of the list. Then I have like different lists on my phone that have to do with school, with teaching. So then that's over there. But then if I have a show in May, a 3-person show at a Gallery Nickel Bouchain in New York City, so that's the next thing on the list. That's what I'll be working on as soon. I've actually started working on that, but that's what I'll focus on when I get back to New York. But I just kind of have like general lists that don't have too much pressure.
Right.
I find that when lists have too much, I mean, although you get endorphins when you mark it off every time, but it's like too much, like too loud, you know, it's like all these things I have to finish. But right now, in a way, like school comes first, my students come first, and I kind of like that. Like I like the pressure off of the artwork and all the pressure geared towards the class and like making the class great and the slideshows and, you know, working with the students, whether it's an independent study or Clay Club. Me and Kathy Liu, my colleague, started, and I kind of like switching gears and thinking about something else besides making art.
Yeah.
Because making art is wonderful, but like I don't want to keep doing the same thing over and over. You know, it just gets like stale. So I need to mix it up a little bit.
Yeah. So then, so how do you so do you know what you're going to make when you go into the studio or when you're prepping for a show? Like, do you kind of just make and then distill and, you know, like look at your evidence after?
Right.
I feel like you have lots of things happening because you work in so many different methods. Like you throw, now you're casting. You've always had molds, right? So you do so many things. You hand build, you paint, you use cold, materials to add
Cold
color.
finish.
Yeah. So I feel like you have so many different methods of making. So I'm just curious how you bring it all together, kind of.
Well, originally for Simon, for Cooper Cole, I was like, okay, I will do ceramic paintings and maybe some freestanding sculptures that I'll assemble on the wheel. But then I came to this warehouse in upstate New York where there were all these molds for sale that some of them hadn't been poured. And I was just like, oh my God, this is like a gold mine. So I started choosing between them different ones. And originally I was going to make it into a lesson plan for my class, for my advanced narrative projects class, but then I started pouring them and then assembling them, and I was like, I think I'm going to do this for the show at Cooper Cole.
It's Jennie's lesson plan. Yeah.
So I try to be really open to whatever the universe is throwing at me because, I've made a lot of vessels, like you saw at Martos, for the flowers that I grew. And like, I need more things to make. Like, people like the bus, but I need to like grow. It's like change or die,
Yeah.
So I try to just like search, read as much as possible,
Yeah.
like get inspiration coming from different places, not necessarily ceramics.
Yeah, because I even feel like your process isn't just the object. It's sort of like then you group the objects, or you have to use the object, or you have to, like they have a sort of a part to play, just the object itself outside of just being a static object, Like even the
Yes.
way you've assembled them in little like vignettes, or I'm not sure
Right,
exactly how
right.
you describe it.
Yes, totally.
Yeah.
Well, like this is the backdrop, and I named it Bruises because it kind of reminded me of bruises, but it also, interestingly enough, like when I was young and I was living in New Jersey, there was a paint your own pottery store, which a lot of these molds are from. Like they were destined to go to a paint your own pottery store, and it was like a really dark time. Being Asian in the 80s in New Jersey was so tough and like so racialized, and like there was nowhere safe. And then there was also domestic violence going on in my house. So it was like the show, it comes together. Colors are very lively and bright and like happy. And someone even mentioned it was like a nursery. But there's an underlying, for me making it, there's like an underlying like current, which is like, it reminds me of like some of the stuff I had to go through and watch in the house, in the family of origin. And then, looking outside the house, and it's like finding refuge in a paint your own pottery store where you can go and like kind of pour your dreams and emotions into this like thing and make it your own in some way, you know what I mean? Even though it's like, it's so generic, but whoever made the mold, like Holland Molds, they took this thing that they're like, okay, this is going to appeal to the general masses, somehow. This bunny or this rabbit, this ghost, and they put it out there to the public and hope that makes the public happy somehow, that they could paint it. And somehow finding that in my like vicinity, it's like, how do I make happiness with this? I want to make happiness. I want to be happy.
Yeah.
And for so long in my
But I think there's like almost like this expectation, like they wanted you to be happy and to paint it, but like there's a specific kind of way to paint it.
Yes, usually, yes.
And you can paint it brown, and you can paint the bow pink, and you can put polka dots on it. But I love the way that you paint yours. Like they're all kind of distorted, and but there's a comfort, I think, in that kind of structure or expectation. Like again, going back to like even just craft as like there is a way to do things. Like you don't completely throw it out the window. Like you bisque fire, you glaze in a kiln. You might not glaze at the right temperatures. I'm not sure, but I feel like there's still like a sense of order in a system that has existed for so many hundreds of years.
And thank God for that. I really like discipline, so you could go nuts in the discipline.
Yeah, within like you create your own boundaries within that sort of.
That's what I kind of like about the slip cast molding. It's like, it's making this thing, but how do you like fuck with it? Somehow.
Yeah.
That's like a fun game.
Yeah, for sure. And then even putting weird things together, or you've got that little demented mouse with the cheese.
Yes.
Yeah, which is really awesome. But
also glazed moods. I like when people send me pictures of what they eat. On the plates.
Yeah. And so with your artwork too, like when it goes out and somebody buys it, like how do you what do you feel about, I don't know, like do you feel like very detached from your work when you're done, or?
Kind of. I mean, there is a bust that never sold, and I think, thank God this didn't sell because it's in my studio and I won't let go of it. And it was around the time my best friend Adam died. So I was like kind of like processing his death, being there when he passed from this world to the next. And I poured that into making molds, literally. And, but usually when things sell, I'm like, adios, it's just, I'm not really attached. I'm like the anti-hoarder.
Yeah.
I throw stuff out all the time.
I mean, I can kind of, I do imagine you very like active, right? And like I'm curious to see your studio. Like I was asking Simon if he'd been to your space because Somehow I want it to be like chaotic and crazy and
It's
messy
pretty
and
organized. I
It
mean,
is,
I
yeah.
have to mop every day because I have dogs and I don't want them to die of silicosis.
Yeah, it's real.
But I feel like it's kind of like making your bed in the morning. It's
Okay.
important to get organized that way. So it's not
Yeah.
that chaotic.
Okay.
And then as soon as it does, I organize it. Or I turn
Yeah.
the paintings around so they're not, visually like annoying me. So when I'm working on new work.
Ah, that's interesting. And then are you like, I mean, this is how I describe stuff for myself. Like, I'll just make, if I have a deadline, I'll just make. And then at the end, I'll put it all together and then I kind of edit or, like, I don't know what I have until I have all my toys sort of in the same box and then I can pick. Like, is that sort of how you work? Like, even just putting these pieces together, like, would you assemble like one grouping and then move from there or?
Yes,
You
like
know?
I didn't see the space before
Yeah.
we got here on Thursday, except through videos and images and photos. And I worked with a company called Wallpaper Projects that made the fabric.
Right.
And I was working with the gallery to get the measurements, and I was just hoping, and they gave the measurements to Wallpaper Projects, and just hoping basically like everything works out. I'm just gonna pour a shitload of molds and glaze them, and let's
Yeah.
just hope it works out. And I trust the gallery with choices about pedestals and the shapes, and I like letting go. It's like I'm filled with so much worry about so many things
Yeah.
in life. It's like very liberating to just let go and be like, let's just hope it works out. And if it doesn't, it's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I
Love
trust.
that. Yeah. I mean, because you definitely have like a sense of confidence, and I feel like everything that you do and an understanding of like who you are. And,
My partner will tell you otherwise.
well, then you'd be a sociopath if you were completely like, unaware or, but yeah, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know how long we've been talking.
I feel like it's forever.
I don't
We can wrap it up here.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe
Yeah.
We can open it up to some questions if there are any. And
Sounds
just
good.
want to thank you both. That was really great. And super
Thank you.
Thank you.